And so I thought to myself, so now who speaks for these children and who speaks for these women? And IDPs had been compensated, other groups of people had been compensated, but for sexual violence, nobody had even thought about it or even talked about that subject. There were initiatives, personal initiatives by many NGOs at that time, but there was no government initiative, first of all, to acknowledge that there were sexual violence survivors from that period, and even the impact of it, they have not really acknowledged and even realized what it is until a day like today.
Our preliminary research at the Global Survivors Fund shows that the number of 900 is a gross underestimation of the scale and the scope of electoral-related sexual violence survivors. We found that the status of survivors is that most have not had any access to any government assistance in the form of medical care, psychosocial support, legal aid, compensation, vocational training, and livelihood opportunities.
This study, for which we have been able to generate all this information that's supported by the Global Survivors Fund, it actually goes into the whole conversation to try and understand, what does reparation mean? And when we talk about reparation, it should be reparation from the point of view of the person who was harmed, not the point of view of the government, because the government was not harmed. The government was not defiled or raped or sodomized or circumcised. It was people.
Reparations actually just repairs you, and it does not necessarily pay you or compensate you accordingly for the pain that you have gone through. It takes care of you physically, it takes care of you emotionally. If you want counseling, it takes care of you medically. So depending on your needs and depending what your approach is, reparations is the way to go.
Na tulianza hizi mambo kuanzia 2008 mpaka leo tukitoa sauti zetu ili sikike, na sijawahi kuona serikali amesema leo tunataka kukutana na survivors of sexual violence tuwaongeleshe, tuone vile watatupoesha. Tuko na hasira mingi sana, tunashindwa. Hii mambo ya kubakwa ni sisi tulijipeleka wenyewe ama tulifanya namna gani?
I think there's a little light of hope. The tides seem to be turning on one front, and that is that survivors are really increasingly finding their way to break through this blanket of silence that's suppressing them, really. And they're demanding themselves now for reparations. Of course, reparations, however, is a responsibility of duty bearers, and it should actually not be up to survivors to plead for reparations. It's a right.
So when you talk about reparation, you must put in place a system where you listen to the people so they can tell you what it is and how they've suffered. So you design a package that is able to respond to the needs. And because we've not done that for 13 years, their needs have, of course, grown.
Maisha mahali yalibadilika. Maisha yamekuwa magumu, kazi iliisha, mzee naye aliaga, niliachiwa watoto, tumekuwa tukikimbizana na serikali ili at least waturudishie maisha, turudi mahali tulikuwa, lakini hali imekuwa ngumu.
For the survivor input, for what we normally say a survivor-centered approach, they have personified what a survivor-centered approach is. They have engaged the survivor from conception to implementation. Thank you. Thank you, Global Fund for Survivors. Thank you.